All right, glad to have you back. Now, PwC's released its latest economic outlook report titled Global Economic Policy Changes and Implications for Nigeria, offering a comprehensive analysis of how evolving global economic dynamics are set to impact Nigeria in 2025. The report examines key developments such as the introduction of new U.S. tariffs, stricter immigration policies, sustained U.S.-China trade tensions, and the global decline in foreign aid. According to PwC, these policy shifts contribute to growing global uncertainty with potential ripple effects on Nigeria's economy through trade, investment flows, and policy alignment challenges. Well, let's talk to Mr. Abiodun Kayode-Alli. He's an economist and senior manager with PwC's. It's good to see you. Good afternoon.
Yeah, thank you for having me today. Good afternoon.
Yeah, I think we should start with an overview of this write-up, this report. A lot is in it, I must tell you. I read through over and over again global economic policy challenges, changes and implications for Nigeria. Give us an overview on what is PwC trying to achieve.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that question. So generally, the report speaks to expectations and forecasts that you might have for the country.
Yeah.
You know, at the beginning of every period, you would expect companies to make predictions of what to expect. But then it seems like a spanner has been thrown in the wheel, right? Thanks to the leader of the largest economy in the world, right? And everyone knows about it. So despite the fact that we had made predictions, we had made plans, the Nigerian government itself had already prepared a budget, then all of a sudden there seems to be some changes in the global environment, right? And it's definitely going to impact on Nigeria as much as it's impacting on every country in the world, right? So Nigeria is not absolved, right, from the impact of the, in his favorite words, from the tariffs that has been introduced, right? So it has actually kind of put the entire economy, global economy, at a kind of reset, and that has even been the main discussion at the IMF spring meeting, right?
True,
like
true.
What exactly?
It dominated discussions at that
yes.
meeting.
So the idea is, what exactly should countries be doing at this point in time, especially developing countries that have been seeking support one way or the other from past administrations in the United States, right? Given the fact that that support would no longer hold, for instance, the U.S. aid, right, which was being given support, humanitarian support to countries who are in need, especially when it comes to humanitarian services, like in tackling diseases, right, like the HIV/AIDS, monkeypox and the likes, right? So the cutting shots of these aids, as well as the introduction of tariffs, knowing that the U.S. is actually a large market for most of the export products. You consider the Africa Growth and Opportunities Act, which has actually, for Nigeria, for instance, represented about 1.8% of our GDP. All right, that's according to the U.S. Representative Trade Statistics, right, for 2022. So given the impact of these tariffs, even though they've been paused, but you still have the benchmark 10% there. So looking at the impact, it simply means that most of these countries have to go back to the drawing board to plan. Nigeria, for instance, a lot of plan has gone into the final approved budget, right? Yeah. And there are still going to be a few bit of changes here and there. So it's the key word I would just say in a nutshell is uncertainty, right? So it's pretty much uncertain. So what should governments, what should businesses, and what should individuals be looking out for? How should they organize themselves? That's what the report simply speaks to.
Growth projections and reprojections are what we also see in a segment of this report. And also looking at the dashboard of key economic indicators, growth rates, 3.4%. We also have the exchange rate at 1,599. I think they're a bit conservative, how do I put it, enough in my thoughts. But what do you make of all of these projections and reprojections, particularly with regards to growth and some of this that we see on this dashboard?
Yeah, thank you. So with respect to growth, right, and those indicators you made reference to, the figures you made reference to, those are figures that we expect to see where things are kept constant, right, if we don't have any further adverse effects from any further announcements, right, from the United States, right? So we expect that those things should remain constant, and if Nigeria continues to pursue most of its reforms, we expect to see that those numbers that you've made reference to. And so if you look at that report, there were 3 scenarios. There is the first scenario of keeping things constant. There is the scenario of, let's say, for instance, for some reasons, we haven't done a good work in terms of having negotiations and discussions with the US, and we are now targeted, right? So that's a worst case scenario. Then there is now going to be a good scenario whereby all of a sudden he changes his mind. I know his advisors, when I say he, I'm referring to Donald Trump, right? His advisors speak to him and he goes for some pro-friendly policies, right, to developing nations, where we have the AGOA still taking effect and probably being extended beyond September. Then we see improvements in those numbers. But one thing I must say is that the conservative figure for the growth rate of 3.4%, even though it's something that we are looking at, I would still say it's not where we ought to be, given the fact that our population growth rate is not too different from that, and that speaks to our ability to be able to absorb the significant population that keeps increasing, right? Are we growing at a pace to right? So I think the point here is that most nations, especially nations in Africa, what we should be doing at this point in time is to look for alternative trading partners, right? Who are those that we can probably will be in need of some of the exports that we have. And if you consider the fact that although our oil exports have been excluded from the tariffs, oil and gas exports, we still have non-oil exports that would be impacted by the 10% ground tariff, right? So it's important that we begin to look at our fellow neighbors that we can trade with, right? The AfCFTA provides that good opportunity. So we being able to trade and we've been able to take advantage of most of this regional integration will go a long way in ensuring that we're able to keep constant our source of foreign exchange, right, beyond the oil. So I think that's one thing that we need to do in order to keep things stable. So that's just what I think.
Moving forward now, the outlook again, back to that outlook. What are some other considerations you look at? You said we should look about trade partners and all of that. Now, after comes to my head that Africans coming together to trade and all of that. But many will also ask you, what opportunities are there for Nigeria? Are we set to be competitive in that market? So those are the questions to be answered. How prepared do you think Nigeria is to opt out of this and get other trading partners? Are we, or do we just don't have any option? We have to do that?
I know we do. And so even apart from the AfCFTA, I mean, even the ECOWAS, I do know that there's been, in 2023, the heads of states came up with a double tax treaty relief for members of ECOWAS. You know, the interesting thing is that apart from South Africa, most of our tax treaty reliefs are with other nations outside Africa, the United Kingdom, Spain, Singapore, right? So we now have an ECOWAS double tax treaty relief, which is meant to promote trade, right, within the ECOWAS region. So to a large extent, Nigeria has ratified that, meaning that Nigeria is ready to do business with any other country within ECOWAS that also does the same. Countries like Cote d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast, Benin, they've actually ratified also, and Liberia, right? So Nigeria is in a good position to trade. And with reference to AfCFTA, I do agree that since Nigeria became a member, I think that was back in 2019, we haven't seen much traction as one would expect, but I do know that there's been cases, instances where certain companies have taken advantage of it. But I think what we need to do now is to kind of enlighten businesses and kind of put it out there, the benefits that are available from contributing and trading with other African countries within the AfCFTA. And I think we need to do a lot more with respect to exporting, right? A lot more needs to be done even at the customs, right? A lot more needs to be done with respect to the processes involved, simplifying these things, because it's one thing to put things on paper and it's one thing to see how it plays out in practice. So I think we do need to do a lot. Then in terms of competitiveness, yeah, I do agree that the government needs to come and help as much as possible with respect to infrastructure, because one thing that we might be disadvantaged in has to do with some of our facilities, right? Infrastructural facilities, where the cost of doing business is kind of higher in Nigeria compared to these countries. I think a lot needs to be done, right, in terms of support. And there are many ways government can support. Even if the government cannot support with finance, I think one thing the government can support with is policies. Policies that make things faster, that makes things easier. And one thing I would say is, if you take, for instance, there's been lots of policies that the government has come out with out of goodwill. But if you look at the attitude of those who are meant to actually bring these things to pass, it hasn't really matched the intention and the goodwill shown by the presidents, right, by the federal government. So I'll give you one instance. Do you know that we have, there's been this circular, I don't want to make mention of the import duty waiver on food. Let me just go to the import duty waiver on importation of medical items. Given the fact that most of the pharmaceutical companies had actually exited, one thing we saw was that the price of health products, pharmaceutical products, was actually on the high. There was an order that came out in October 2024 with respect to allowing for waivers for importation of items that we don't produce, or input items that can be used, that can be further transformed into final outputs, right? That order came out in October 2024, and there was meant to be a 30-day timeline from when implementation will kick effect, with the collaboration of ministries like the Ministry of Finance as well as the Ministry of Health. Do you know that since that October 2024, the circular to guide the implementation of that order didn't come out until March 2025, right? So I think there is a lot more that needs to be done with respect to easing compliance and implementing most of the policies put out by government, right? One other good thing I'm looking forward to, which I think has to do with a kind of market-friendly policy, would be in terms of the fiscal reforms, right, which actually to a large extent exempt a lot of people, a lot of small businesses from taxes. So I think most of these things can help make our people competitive and ready for the AfCFTA.
Interesting conversation. We have just one minute and a half to go. What more do you want Nigerians to know about this report?
Okay, so I think it's quite important that businesses take a look at it and see how they can position themselves, right? Because not just businesses, individuals, as well as government itself. Given the fact that we cannot isolate ourselves from what is going on in the global economy, if businesses are carrying out transactions in foreign currencies, you might want to reconsider renegotiating the cost of probably renegotiating contracts to Naira-denominated currencies, right? Then also, if you want to consider some of your inputs, right, some of your raw materials that you are sourcing, we think it's quite important that you consider sourcing things locally, right? Looking inwards, first of all, because it's quite expensive right now to import most of these items. So, and I think government also can do a lot more when it comes to attracting foreign direct investments through friendly policies and monitoring most of its ministries, departments, and agencies to ensure that things are actually being implemented as put out in most of these policy documents.
Well, interesting conversation as always. This conversation around this report shouldn't be just a one-off. I think we still have to get a part 2 of this conversation if you let that work. I know you're tight schedule, but you need to work it out for us. Mr. Abiodun Kayode-Alli, senior economist. Manager, of course, with senior economist and senior manager, right? Yeah, with tax, PricewaterhouseCoopers. They're breaking it down, this interesting report that has to do with global outlook, policy issues, and how it affects Nigeria, and of course, even the entire globe. Thank you so much, and have a great weekend.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Tulu. You too.